Abscond, swarming, balling, burr comb, cross comb, DCA, flight paths, cleansing flights. The list goes on and on. It's like beekeepers are trying to be as confusing as possible when they talk. This video is just about all of this beekeeping terminology so that you know what people are saying. The first one is abscond. When bees abscond, it means that the entire hive takes off suddenly. Maybe too many mites, too many ants, too much moisture. A hive absconds when the queen and all of the bees take off. Next we have swarm or swarming. Bees swarm when the queen and roughly half of the worker bees in the hive take off in search of a new home. Usually when the hive is overcrowded and they leave half the worker bees behind, as well as a developing queen that's going to be hatching soon. Balling a queen is when the worker bees in the hive kill a queen. A number of worker bees will surround the queen, creating essentially this ball shape, and they will pull at her legs and wings as well as produce heat and heat her up and suffocate her until she dies. What a way to be killed. A waggle dance is the dance that the worker bees do to tell another worker bee how to find the location they were at. A waggle dance can be done to show another worker bee how to find the flowers that she was just at, or a scout bee can do that when showing other bees the location that she thinks would be a good spot for their new home. A cluster is a mass of bees. This can be when the bees are all clustered together inside the beehive when it is cold out, or it can be a cluster of bees in a swarm. Laying worker. This is when a worker bee takes it upon herself to start laying eggs. Since worker bees are not fertile, these eggs will develop into the male bees, which we call drones. This does not happen often, but when it does happen, it's usually when a hive is queenless, which means they have no queen. Burr comb, cross comb, brace comb, this all refers to honeycomb that the bees have built that is not within the boundaries of the frame. It usually connects one frame to the other, or to the frame to the side of the beehive, or to the lid, or to the bottom board. Often the beekeeper will scrape this out so that they can pull the frames out of the hive to inspect them. Festooning is the act of young worker bees connecting their legs to form a chain. They usually gorge themselves on honey first so that their bodies can secrete wax while festooning. It is thought that this assists bees when building honeycomb. DCA, or drone congregating area, are areas that drones congregate in, waiting for a virgin queen to fly by on her mating flight. The flight path is the path in which bees fly when they leave the hive. If there is an obstruction in front of the hive, such as a bush, the bee's flight path would probably go up and around the bush. If an obstruction happens to disturb the bee's flight path, such as someone standing in front of the front entrance of a beehive, this can disrupt the bee's flight path, and you might find them congregating right where this obstruction is until it moves. Otherwise known as don't stand in front of a beehive. Cleansing flight is when bees leave the beehive to go do their business. They don't do it inside the hive, and so when it is winter, early spring, and it is not warm enough out for the bees to be coming and going from the hive daily, bees will do a cleansing flight when it is warm enough for them to. Signs that bees have just gone on a cleansing flight is that you will see little specks of yellow and brown in the snow around the beehive. Drifting is when bees move from one hive to the next. This is more common when you have a long row of beehives all next to each other. It is also more common with the younger bees to drift, as well as on windy days. Robbing is when bees steal from each other. Not only honeybees rob, but you can also find other pollinators like wasps coming into your beehive to steal and rob from them. Robbing is a serious issue, and during times when there are not a lot of flowers blooming, a hive can be robbed to the extent that it can collapse. Scout bees are bees that leave the hive in search of something. This might be water, food like nectar and pollen, or a new place to live if they are looking to swarm. Supersedure, or to supersede, this is when the older queen gets replaced by a younger queen. This can be done by the beekeeper, or the honeybees can do it. Next we have strains of bees. This refers to the different genetics that bees have depending on where they're from. Common strains you might hear about if you're looking to buy bees would be Italian, German, Caucasian, Buckfast, Carniolan, and Russian. Some are known to swarm a little bit easier, some are known to deal with winter a little bit better, and some are known for being a little bit more docile. Next, let's talk about the beekeeper activities. We have pinch, or pinching the queen. This is when you kill the queen in your beehive by pinching her. Treating bees. Treating bees is usually what people refer to when they put in a treatment, whether a synthetic chemical or an organic acid, into a beehive to substantially lower the rural mite levels into the hive. A cutout is when a beekeeper will remove an established beehive from an area, such as bees that have taken up residence inside your shed or inside a tree. Whereas catching a swarm is when you find a cluster of bees hanging from somewhere, such as a tree branch. They have not built a residence, established a residence anywhere. Splitting your hive. Splitting a hive is when you take one beehive and you take resources from it to produce another beehive that is smaller. One of the hives will have the current queen and the other hive will either have to make their own queen, or you can purchase a queen and put it into that hive. Installing bees is when you purchase bees either in a package, which is a box that is about 3 pounds of worker bees plus one queen, or you are taking your nuke, and short for nucleus hive, and that is a small starter beehive, and you're taking the bees and frames from inside it and you're putting it inside your established beehive that the bees will be in for the rest of the year. Bee space, that is that special space that is just large enough for a bee to get through. Bee space is usually about 3/8 of an inch, or somewhere between 1/4 of an inch and 3/8 of an inch. You do not want more than that 3/8 of an inch bee space around your beehive, or you will have burr comb / cross comb. To requeen a hive is to pinch your queen, which means kill her, and put a new queen in. Grafting, this is the act of creating your own queen. This is taking very small larvae in that first day that it hatched and putting it into cups, and then putting it into a hive that does not have a queen and has lots of nurse bees that will feed it royal jelly and produce queens. The act of grafting is done so that you can produce a lot of queens in a very short period of time using a small amount of resources. Rendering wax. Rendering wax is the act of melting down the honeycomb, any little pieces of comb or wax cappings from your beehive, and separating this wax from the impurities in it, like honey, parts of bees, and propolis, so that this wax can be used for things like candle making, body products, and other crafts. Feral bees. Feral bees are bees that are not kept by a beekeeper but exist in the wild and take care of themselves, all on their very own. Honey flow, or sometimes referred to as a nectar flow, is the time of year in which there are a lot of flowers producing nectar blooming. This is usually in the late spring and early summer months. On to all the different problems you can see within the beehive. First, we have chalk brood. There's not much the beekeeper does for chalk brood, but chalk brood is when there is a fungus that attacks the larva in the hive. It turns this chalky, whitish, gray looking substance inside the cells, and usually the bees will take it out, but as the beekeeper you can remove it as well, and usually it starts to clear up after a few days to weeks. Foul brood is a highly contagious disease amongst honeybee colonies. It will cause the colony collapse, and it can spread very quickly among your apiary. It is important to confirm that your bees do have foul brood, and if they do, you must burn the entire hive plus equipment and notify your state apiary office. Nosema. Nosema is spores in the honeybee's digestive tract. The only way to know for sure whether your hive has nosema is to examine some bees under a microscope. Next, on to feeding. We have syrup. That is something that the beekeeper can make easily with sugar and water, or they can purchase. It is something that can be fed to the bees. It can be a way to help the bees grow early in the spring, or a way to help the bees not eat through their winter storage at times when there aren't a lot of flowers blooming. There's also candy and fondant. These are both a hard sugar that you can feed your bees in the wintertime when you do not want to add more moisture to the beehive. Those hard candies can also absorb any condensation dripping down. Next, on to beekeeping supplies. We have lids for the Langstroth hive, the telescoping outer cover, and the migratory lid. Migratory lids are flat boards that are put onto beehives by migratory beekeepers to save space. Telescoping outer covers are lids for Langstroth style beehives that go past the box, which is good for beehives when it is very rainy, windy, or cold. We have the inner cover, which goes on top of the beehive before the outer cover is put on top. It is not necessary throughout the year. Some beekeepers choose to use it for different tasks, but not always a crucial part to the beehive. Then we have the boxes. We have the deepest box called the deep. We have medium boxes and shallows. Mediums and shallows are often used by beekeepers for their honey, and deeps and sometimes mediums are used by beekeepers for the brood. Hive body is also another term used to refer to the boxes of a beehive. A super is another term used by the beekeeper for the boxes that you put honey in. You can have a shallow super or a medium super, and these are all different kinds of hive bodies. Supering is a term that people will use when they are putting a super or a box for the bees to put honey in on top of a beehive. Inside the boxes, you have your frames. Then inside the frames, you have foundation. Foundation is an item that some beekeepers put within their frames, and this is the start of the bees building honeycomb. Foundation can be plastic, coated with wax, or it can be made entirely from beeswax. Or you cannot use any foundation at all. Flow hive. This is a style beehive that is a Langstroth style hive. However, the box where the honey is, the honey super, is full of flow hive frames. These frames do not have foundation in them. The entire honeycomb is built out using the flow frame technology. Langstroth. Langstroth is a style of beehive that is invented so that beekeepers could pull frames out and inspect and harvest honey easily. It is made of boxes that are stacked up on top of each other, and within the boxes are frames. Top bar. A top bar is a style beehive that is horizontal in shape and does not have a full frame but just bars on the top for bees to build comb off of. Bees. We have the queen bee, also known as the mother bee, the bee that is laying all of the eggs in the hive. We have the worker bee, the bee that is secreting wax, building honeycomb, going to flowers to gather nectar, pollen, and water, defending the hive. We also have the male bee, which is often referred to as the drone. He is the one mating with the queen. However, they do not mate with the queen in their hive. They go to their DCAs, drone congregating areas, and wait for a virgin queen on her mating flight to go by. Queen cage. A queen cage is a tiny cage that the beekeeper will put a queen in. Sometimes there will also be a few worker bees as attendants in there with her. The queen cage helps to separate the queen from the rest of the bees so that they do not kill her when introducing her to a new colony of bees. Queen excluder. A queen excluder is placed on top of a beehive and it prevents the queen from getting into the other areas of the hive. It is often put on the uppermost brood box to prevent her from getting into the honey supers. Marked queen. A marked queen is a queen with a paint dot on her back. Different colors are used to represent the different years, and it is often a good way to make it easy to spot the queen as well as know whether your hive swarmed or not. Queenless hive. A queenless hive is a hive with no queen. Queen cell. A queen cell is a cell in the honeycomb that has a queen bee developing in it. It will hang upside down off of the honeycomb and is similar in shape to a peanut shell but a little bit smaller. A queen cup is a cup that might have a queen developing in it one day. It can be made by the bees and you will see them throughout the beehive. They are almost looking like queen cells but empty and open, or they can be bought by the beekeeper and you can use a grafting tool to put a larva into this cup and put it into a beehive with the intention of the bees making a queen with it. Queen bank. A queen bank is often used by beekeepers with a considerable amount of hives. A queen bank is a beehive that will have a few caged queens inside it, and this colony will keep the queens fed and warm until the beekeeper is ready to put the queens into their respective hives. Brood. Brood are bees that are developing that have not hatched yet. There are 3 stages for the brood: egg, larva, and pupa. And finally, on to honey and other things that you can harvest from the hive. We have nectar and honey. Nectar is a substance that is produced by flowers that is primarily water with a little bit of sugar inside. It is collected by bees and brought back to the hive. Honey is a substance made by bees. It is collected from flowers in the form of nectar and then passed off among the bees, put into cells. The majority of the moisture is evaporated, and once it is considered ripe, it is honey, and it has a capping put over it within the beehive. Fully cured honey should have roughly 17% moisture in it. Pollen is a substance produced by flowers for the sake of reproduction. Bees will go to flowers and collect this dust-like substance and bring it back to the hive. Through a fermentation process, they will turn into what we call bee bread. Bee bread is a substance made by the bees. It is a mixture of pollen as well as other enzymes and bacteria that the bees will store in the cells of honeycomb. They will often put a layer of honey on top of it to help with preservation. It is fed to the young bees and larvae because it is rich in protein. Cut comb or comb honey refers to when the beekeeper keeps the honey in the comb and will put that in its own case or a jar with liquid honey. Wet frames is when the beekeeper takes a frame of honeycomb and spins it in an extractor. The frames with the honey that have been spun out and are empty are now wet with honey, and they call these wet frames. Crystallized honey is honey that is no longer in liquid form, but the honey has formed crystals. These crystals can be very small, which is usually what happens when honey has a high glucose level and it crystallizes very fast, or the crystals can be much larger, which usually happens when the honey takes a much longer time to crystallize. Crystallized honey is not bad, and it can be liquefied by heating it up. Raw honey is honey that has not been heated to the extent that it has killed all the beneficial enzymes within it. Creamed honey is when the beekeeper controls the rate at which the honey crystallizes, causing the honey to be the smaller crystals that can be more spreadable. Fermented honey. Fermented honey is honey that has a high moisture content in it. It is caused by a yeast, and once honey has fermented, you cannot reverse this process. Propolis. Propolis is a material that the bees gather from plants and trees. It is a resin type substance that is very gooey and sticky, especially when warm, and bees use it to seal up the cracks within the beehive as well as for its antimicrobial properties. Some say the bees might even use it to disinfect the cells before the brood are put into it. Cappings. When a frame is full of honey, the bees will put a capping over the cells. When the beekeeper is harvesting honey, they will open up the cappings and spin the honey or crush it. A cell can also have a capping over it when there is a pupa inside, which is the 3rd and final stage of development before a honeybee hatches. Royal jelly. This is a substance that is fed to the brood as well as the queen bee. It is a substance produced only by the worker bees by a gland in their head. The brood section, also called the brood nest, is the area of the beehive where the brood is located. Often in the bottom of the beehive, in the center of the box. And for horizontal hives, it would usually be in the center. Brood rearing is the act of raising brood. And last but not least, we have Apis mellifera. This is the scientific name for the European honeybee. So is there anything I forgot? Let me know in the comments, and happy beekeeping. If you are getting overwhelmed by all there is to learn and know and buy when it comes to becoming a beekeeper, check out my online beekeeping class. This has all of the chapters to getting started and becoming a beekeeper, as well as advanced beekeeping. Plus, it includes mentorship for me, so you can email me, join our live chats just for the students, and have somebody that you can talk to when you have a problem. If you are still watching, you can get 25% off discount. Just use B words at checkout. Want to learn more about bees and all of the stuff you need to learn to become a beekeeper? Check out this next video about how to open a beehive.